Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm really excited to be with you today, and I want to thank all of you for taking the time out to join us for this important discussion and the kickoff to Senior Law Day. And I really want to recognize the Boulder County Bar Association and all the people who put so much effort into organizing this important event. It is a great event every year, but given the challenges we face right now with regards to the pandemic, it's been set up as a webinar series, and it's taken a tremendous amount of time and effort to put together the webinar series and make sure that we're able to deliver what we seek to do every year, which are helpful, practical tips for the health, safety, and well-being of the elders in our community. And I can't thank and applaud the organizers and the Boulder County Bar Association enough for all the tremendous work they've done. I'm honored to serve as the district attorney. I have the privilege of working with 90 outstanding men and women in the office here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the office, but really our goal for today is to talk about things we're seeing in the community and what we could do to make sure that we don't have elder abuse in Boulder County. Boulder County is not immune from the challenges we see elsewhere in the state of Colorado and throughout the nation, and elder abuse continues to be a priority for this office. And we're going to talk about, as we do when we talk about elder abuse cases, what are the things we're seeing and what are some practical steps that you and your loved ones can take to make sure that you don't become a victim, and that we're doing everything we can to protect the older people in our community. I will say, as the snow is starting to fall outside my window, that we're going through an incredibly challenging time as a country. I recognize that. But I'm filled with hope for the future, and I remain excited about the progress we're going to make. Part of the reason I feel so hopeful is because of each and every one of you and the challenges you've overcome in your life already, and the challenges this country has overcome in the past. And it makes me confident that we're going to be able to get through these trying times. Part of how we get through these is together, leaning on one another, helping one another, and supporting our loved ones. And that's why this topic is particularly timely this year. So I'm so glad that the pandemic didn't put an end to Senior Law Day, but instead that the Boulder County Bar Association did a tremendous job keeping this important event going. So we're going to talk about how our justice system can best serve Boulder County, and in particular, our older population during this pandemic and beyond. And you should see here on your screen an overview of today's presentation. First and foremost, that elder abuse is an injustice with serious consequences for the victim, their loved ones, and our community. I'm going to talk a little bit about the particular issues we see here in Boulder County and focus on who are the victims and who are the perpetrators. Because a real goal of my presentation today is to raise awareness in your own lives and develop some practical ideas about how you can avoid anyone in your family being victimized. These cases are a priority for the district attorney's office. So by sharing with you the red flags we look for and some of the common trends we see in terms of the crimes as well as the victims and the perpetrators, I'm confident that together we can prevent your loved ones from being a victim of elder abuse. And finally, I'll talk about the impacts of the pandemic, both in terms of our older community, but also on the justice system as a whole. A couple quick facts about the district attorney's office. Our office has jurisdiction over all criminal offenses ranging from traffic up to and including sex assaults and homicide cases here in the 20th Judicial District. The 20th Judicial District is Boulder County. We're one of the few judicial districts in the state that only has one county within it. Most of the other judicial districts have multiple counties. So for example, down in southwestern Colorado, the 7th Judicial District has 6 counties that the district attorney's office has jurisdiction over. It was decided early on in Colorado's history based on population. Boulder, Denver, Pueblo, and Weld are the 4 that have single county jurisdictions. So we have jurisdiction over any criminal offense committed, whether it be in Ward, Louisville, the city of Boulder, anywhere within Boulder County. As I mentioned, I have the privilege of working with 90 outstanding, tireless public servants here in the DA's office. 35 are prosecutors, 9 are criminal investigators, and we have folks in our victim witness support unit and throughout other areas of the office, including restorative justice and diversion, which continues to be a priority for us. We handle approximately 11,000 cases per year. So Boulder County continues to be a safe and wonderful place to live, but we still have a fair amount of activity in the county and roughly 11,000 cases per year that our office handles in criminal court. Those courts are located both in downtown Boulder and also in Longmont. So in Longmont, we handle any misdemeanor or traffic case committed within the city of Longmont. And in downtown Boulder, we handle traffic and misdemeanor cases for the rest of the county, as well as all felonies committed within Boulder County. Our mission in every case is to do justice, not to rack up convictions like notches in a gun belt, but to do the right thing. We do that in a number of different ways, with the overarching goal of enhancing community safety while working to improve the justice system. We do that by successfully prosecuting cases, developing programs to reduce the rate of reoffense in Boulder County, and reaching out to our community, such as this presentation, to make sure that our community members are armed with the knowledge to prevent themselves from ever being victimized by crime, know what the role of the district attorney is, where I'm committed to being transparent and accessible, and also making sure our community has all the answers they need to any question involving the criminal justice system. To me, it's really important that we foster the trust of the community as we continue to work towards doing justice in every case. If we don't have the trust of the community, people aren't going to be willing to call 911, cooperate as witnesses, come down to the courthouse, or serve as jurors. So we are continuing to work on improving the justice system, because I know that if we do that, we'll also enhance community safety, which is our top priority. When I talk about cases being our top priority, there are a couple different categories that we look at here in the district attorney's office. I'll just touch on these briefly. Violent cases, so you see there on your screen, assaults, domestic violence, sex offenses, and murder cases. Crimes against our most vulnerable, children, elder abuse, individuals with disabilities, and immigrants. And then financial frauds and scams. And we're going to be talking a bit more about financial frauds and scams. So you might be wondering, why are they on the list of top priority cases for the DA's office? Well, if you think about how a financial fraud or scam is committed, it's different than other offenses. So for example, you may have an individual who drives under the influence once in their life, or another person who gets into a bar fight when they're 21 years old, and it happens just once in their life. Financial frauds, scams, those are committed by people who are waking up day after day after day, looking to steal money from other individuals. So those are priority cases, because those cases are often hard to detect unless you have people who are working hard, connecting with the community, connecting with businesses, and proactively seeking out those financial frauds and scams, and then able to handle them effectively when they are brought to the attention of law enforcement and the DA's office. So let's talk about elder abuse. It's defined as physical, sexual, or psychological abuse, as well as neglect, abandonment, and financial exploitation of an older person. In Colorado, elder abuse includes victims who are 70 years old and above, and that's by statute. They're classified as at-risk adults, as are any adults 18 and over who have a disability. The important part of this is that Colorado law recognizes that crimes against the at-risk adult is more harmful to our community, our society, and to the victim, and for that reason, they carry more severe penalties than crimes against the general population. Let's talk briefly about the consequences of elder abuse, because I'm not looking simply to scare you with today's presentation, but I want to raise awareness and then give you the practical tips you need to make sure elder abuse never impacts your family and your loved ones. And when you look at the list of consequences here, you'll see how important it is that we do that together. It triples the risk of premature death and causes illness, injury, suffering, and declines in mental health. Specifically, victims of elder abuse are 4 times more likely to be admitted to a nursing home and 3 times more likely to be admitted to a hospital. Obviously, the financial effects of elder abuse deplete resources, and it causes individuals to lose their financial independence and to have to rely more on healthcare programs and benefits. There's an estimated annual loss nationwide due to the financial exploitation of older adults that comes to a total of $2.9 billion with a B dollars. That doesn't even include the cost for other forms of abuse and neglect, such as the unnecessary hospitalizations that may result. It is a growing problem here in Boulder County. Why is that? Well, you see there on the graph on your screen, the projected growth of the 60 and over population in Boulder County. By 2030, all baby boomers are going to be over 65 years old. By 2060, nearly 25% of our population will be over 65. Adults 65 and older are the fastest growing segment of our population. In fact, the number of individuals 80 and over is expected to grow by 244% by 2050. One of my goals is to be in that group by that point. So I will say that when we look at the population growth through Boulder County in that age demographic, this is an area for us to continue to focus on. And that's why it's such a priority for the District Attorney's Office, Health and Human Services, and the Bar Association to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect older people in our community. In my mind, personally, the last thing that should happen to someone who's worked incredibly hard and spent their life living here in Boulder County is for them to be victimized and to be a victim of elder abuse. We can't let that happen. We shouldn't let it happen. And by talking today about things to watch out for, I'm confident that we can do a better job making sure it doesn't happen. There are some common types of crimes we see against elders. Theft from an at-risk person, so 70 or above. That includes identity theft, forgery, and exploitation. Assault on an at-risk victim. Criminal negligence resulting in death and serious bodily injury. And then caretaker neglect, including abandonment or confinement. These are some of the common types of offenses we see here at the Boulder District Attorney's Office. And they're handled by our Community Protection Division, which specializes in elder abuse cases. And I'm incredibly grateful to Liz Parker, Michelle Sudano, and Christian Gardner-Wood, and Steve Fritz for the work they do within the Community Protection Division. They're an incredible and outstanding group of public servants, and they're here to help you anytime you or a family member is victimized by elder abuse. So who are those victims of elder abuse? That's a good question. 1 in 10 Americans age 60 and above report having experienced some form of elder abuse. About 2/3 of elder abuse victims are women. Black, Latino, poor, and isolated older adults are disproportionately victimized. Nearly half of people with dementia suffer from abuse or neglect by their caregivers. Let's stop and think about that for a moment. Nearly half. So if you have someone in your family who's suffering from dementia, you should be especially aware that nearly half of all people with dementia suffer from some abuse or neglect by their caregivers. So who's committing these crimes? Who commits elder abuse? Here's the really scary part. In over 75% of all incidents, the perpetrator is a family member. These are not offenses that are normally committed by strangers. These are crimes committed by someone known to the victim, someone in the victim's closest inner circle. I really need to stress that, because when I see 75% of all incidents being committed by a family member of the victim, it highlights a couple things. First, that if you have the suspicion or reason to believe that someone is committing elder abuse, the answer can never be, but wait, that's Uncle Bobby. Or wait, that's his nephew. He would never do that. Wait, that's her daughter. She would never do that. Far too often, it's those family members who are committing elder abuse. And we'll talk about the red flags to look for and what to do when you see those red flags. But I can't emphasize enough that because the person is related by blood doesn't mean they're committing the crime. In fact, sadly, in over 75% of these crimes, the person is related by blood. So making sure that we have awareness of this fact, this data, and that we react accordingly to protect our family members. And let's look at some of the local numbers for 2019. So Adult Protective Services received more than 1,500 reports for concerns about at-risk adults in 2019, which was an increase from 2018. The Boulder Police Department investigated 337 reports, and Longmont PD had 301 elder abuse reports. Our office, the District Attorney's Office, handled 613 separate cases through the Victims of Crime Act, Victim Assistance. Our total reports have gone up in the first quarter of 2020. And in 2019, overall, the number of cases with victims over 55 years of age had gone up as well. So here, I'm going to show you just quickly the percentage for each type of case that we have. You see there on our screen that of the 613 cases handled by the DA's office, 37% involve reports of more than one form of abuse or neglect. 28% involve physical assault. 10% involve specific elder abuse and neglect. 26% domestic violence or family violence. And you see the others on the screen there next to the picture of Lady Justice. Lady Justice, of course, if you look at that photograph, the blindfold is to ensure that justice is blind. The scales are to ensure that justice is equal. And the sword is to ensure that justice is delivered. So when we talk about elder abuse, it's important for us to know what the data reflects so we can make sure we're doing justice in all of these cases. Here are some of the demographics that we see in the Boulder DA's office. From January of 2017 through March of 2020, 1,380 people received services through the DA's office. The majority of those individuals were women over 60 years old. And you see there the types of cases we're seeing in our elder abuse work, and classified as victims with disabilities, struggling either with issues related to cognitive, physical, or mental health. Why is it that older adults are prone to abuse? Well, first, the older people in our community have been accumulating wealth for longer. And that's reflected by the fact that 70% of the nation's household wealth is controlled by those over 50 years old. Also, there are some older people in our community who are less familiar with technological advances, computer services, and they might be more trusting of individuals who are calling them or contacting them via email. Of course, there are times where older people in our community are more isolated or lonely, especially now, and I'll be talking more about the impacts of the pandemic, particularly as it relates to elder abuse in just a few minutes. But depending on others to meet our daily needs. And two things I really want to flag as reasons why older adults are prone to abuse is financial impairment is one of the earliest symptoms of cognitive decline. So if someone's starting to decline cognitively, financial impairment is one of the first things to be impacted. And they have difficulty managing financial information, which puts older adults at greater risk. I'm reminded of my father, may he rest in peace. He had suffered a major stroke at one point. And when he first came out of the stroke, he was 100% certain that he had a life insurance policy, that there was a bill due, and that if I failed to pay the bill, he was going to lose $8 million. Now, he had a life insurance policy, but there was no bill due, and there was no $8 million. But he was absolutely convinced, because he was going through a period of cognitive decline related to this as a result of the stroke. Now, if you said hello to him, if you saw him, you would think he was doing great. But if you talked to him about his financial well-being and some of the finances that he had available to him at the time, he was starting to suffer in terms of his ability to recall things accurately. And thankfully, he got through that difficult period and then would laugh after the fact about how certain he was about the $8 million and the life insurance policy and the bill being due, because in hindsight, none of those things were accurate. But when people are going through a period of cognitive decline, financial impairment is one of the first things to go, or to occur, excuse me. And as a result, older adults are at greater risk when they're having difficulty managing their financial information. So having someone they trust to help them with that financial information, the paying of bills, the monitoring of accounts is really important. But it's that question of who they trust, who has access. Particularly when you think about the fact that 75% of these offenses are committed by someone known to the victim, someone in the victim's family. So making sure that you have the right person or people working together and perhaps more than one person in the family, making sure that the accounts are being handled properly. There's a general lack of awareness around elder abuse. And that's why I so appreciate the opportunity to come together with you today. In a lot of ways, it's the silent problem of our time. And our response to elder abuse is far behind our response to child abuse and domestic violence, just as a general concept, just in terms of what the justice system is doing nationwide. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Excuse me. Well, first, when I look at mandatory reporting for child abuse, which requires teachers, counselors, people in a position of trust who care for children, they're mandatory reporters under the law. They have to report any possibility of child abuse to law enforcement. That went into effect in 1963. There's a policy requiring law enforcement to make an arrest if they have probable cause to believe domestic violence has been committed. By that, I mean, back in the day, it was possible that a police officer would go to a house where domestic violence had been committed and tell the couple, all right, knock it off. You have to get along. Don't make me come back here. Well, given the lethality factors in play and the consequences that may result from that approach, in 1994, the state of Colorado joined many other states in the nation in having a mandatory arrest for domestic violence requirement by statute. So 63 for mandatory reporting of child abuse, 94 for mandatory arrest of domestic violence offenders. It wasn't until 2014 that the Colorado legislature adopted a bill and signed into law by Governor Hickenlooper that any good faith belief that elder abuse had been committed must be reported to Adult Protective Services and to law enforcement. That started in 2014. So based on the gap from 63 through 2014, I imagine you'd agree with me that we're lagging far behind in addressing elder abuse, and that's why this discussion today is so important and why it remains a priority for our office, to make sure that we have all the protections in place to protect and serve the older people in our community. So the fact that we're having this conversation today goes a long way. And what I would want you to know is that elder abuse and neglect are significantly underreported for a number of reasons. One is, of course, people who have advanced cognitive decline may be unable to report or participate in research studies. But the next two are things I really want to emphasize, which are often victims don't want to report to family members or loved ones and don't want to make a report to law enforcement about their family members or loved ones. So if you have a grandmother or a grandfather whose niece is helping them with their financial affairs, and they have this suspicion that the niece is stealing from them, there's understandably hesitation about ever reporting that to law enforcement or prosecutors. And you see that in that final bullet point on the screen. 63% of older adults say they don't want the police involved in their case. 74% said they did not want prosecutors involved. And that's because they're worried about the consequences for their family member. Even the family member who's committing elder abuse, they're worried about the consequences for that family member. And they're also worried that they're going to feel embarrassed or be blamed or lose their independence if they report that they've been victimized. So what can we do about elder abuse? First, being aware that it's a problem. And the fact that you're here today, to me, means that you're aware that it's a problem. It's like that old George Carlin joke, where George Carlin said, you know, the individuals who show up for a seminar and how to be motivated don't actually need to attend the seminar. They're already motivated. So being aware that it's a problem, knowing the risk factors, looking out for the red flags, learning from the data, and making sure you report any suspected abuse or neglect. That's the most important thing. Making the report doesn't result in someone going to prison. Making the report results in law enforcement, Adult Protective Services, and the district attorney's office being able to help make sure the victim is not being victimized, and that they're being cared for properly, and that the right thing is happening in their lives. And there are oftentimes reports are made where it doesn't result in a criminal case. So I would urge people to make the report if they have any reason to suspect abuse or neglect. So looking out for those red flags, and I'm going to put them on the screen here and touch on each one briefly. So if you see someone in your loved one's inner circle who expresses a sudden interest in their finances, or attempts to increase their own access, or decrease the access of others. So for example, let's say you have someone who's a little bit older, and someone in their family is trying to increase their access, increase their control, while also pushing away and minimizing the access and influence of others over the finances, over the will, over the bank accounts. Also, in addition to looking for the isolation of the older adult from others, perhaps the presence of unexplained physical injuries or damage to personal property. When it comes to financial fraud, we'll often see older people with a sudden inability to manage their finances. They're overdrawing their accounts or engaging in get-rich-quick schemes. Or you may have a victim who's suddenly withdrawing from normal activities and becoming more and more confused. And finally, a significant red flag to watch for, a new friend or love interest who needs financial assistance or encourages odd behavior. These are all red flags for us to watch for in order to help protect the older people in our lives. So some general safety tips. making sure you're on the do not call list. I know these lists aren't 100% perfect. I'm on the do not call list, and I feel like I'm on the call me with another scam right now list. But it's still important to be on the do not call list because it limits how many calls we get. Hanging up on telemarketers. Just because they know your name doesn't mean they have your best interests at heart. So if you pick up the phone and there's a delay, that's the computer system that they use to call all of us. Just hang up the phone right away. And if you say hello and they say, oh, is this Michael? That doesn't mean they actually know me. They're not a friend of mine. They're not a family member. They're a telemarketer or a scammer. You should just hang up the phone. Never, never give out your personal information on the phone. In fact, I'll tell you personally, I take this even a step further. Even if I know the group that's calling me, even if I believe it to be real, I still won't give out my personal information on the phone. So for example, I graduated from Boston University Law School, and every year the law school will call me and ask for a contribution. And every year we have the same conversation. Is this Michael? Yes, and I see that it's Boston University Law School in my caller ID, so I don't hang up right away. We'd like you to make a donation. I say every time, I'm happy to do it. You have to mail it to me. Now they're trained in their script to say, oh, but you could do it by credit card. You could do it. And I just listen. I say, you have to mail it to me. I'm not going to give you my credit card information over the phone. I never do that. Also, being really careful with emails. Often we see these email scams where people prey upon older people in the community. The scammers prey upon older people in the community by saying they have to pay money, they owe money, or there's a fine being assigned to them because they failed to appear for jury service. There's all these attempts to make you click on a link. Never click on that link. Delete the email and don't click on the link. Monitoring your bills and your credit card activity to make sure no money is being siphoned out of your account at all. When in doubt, asking for help and calling us for help. And on Thursday, Liz Parker, who's an incredible resource and a terrific public servant from the District Attorney's Office, is presenting Thursday at noon. And I really encourage you to attend Liz's webinar. She's going to get into detail with practical safety tips and some of the common scams and frauds we see here at the District Attorney's Office and throughout the state of Colorado. So knowing the risk factors for victimization. These are the things we see in too many of our victims, and this is based on the research that we've looked at. More rapid cognitive decline, increased age, lower education level, a lack of social network and support. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. Required assistance for daily living, depression, loneliness, isolation, and often prior trauma or abuse. One thing I really want to hit on today, as you heard during the introduction, is the impact of COVID-19 on elder abuse and also on the justice system. It has certainly increased stress and isolation for older adults. And those are factors that lower social support and increase mental health concerns, and as a result, increase the risk of victimization. We see it in a number of different areas. So similarly, in domestic violence cases, when COVID-19 hit Colorado in mid-March, our office was extremely concerned about the impact of domestic violence victims, because often victims of domestic violence are isolated by their abuser, controlled by their abuser, and the people who help domestic violence victims are those in their circle. You know, maybe the person goes to the hairstylist or goes to the gym, goes to work, whatever it might be, and they receive help from their friends, colleagues, and loved ones. Because of COVID-19, domestic violence victims are being cut off from those people. They're not going to the gym. They're not meeting with their friends. Maybe they're working remotely. All these things are lending themselves to the isolation and control in which domestic violence thrives. That was a concern of ours from the beginning of the coronavirus, from the beginning of the pandemic. We've done a lot of community outreach, and I could talk more about that at the end if you have questions, but we've done a lot of community outreach and victim outreach for individuals suffering from domestic violence. Despite all of our efforts, we're still seeing the numbers go up here in Boulder County for domestic violence from March through July of 2020 as compared to March through July of 2019. It's a really significant jump. So we've been very concerned, and perhaps you've seen things in the media or social media about our efforts, because we want to make sure victims know the district attorney's office has remained open throughout the pandemic. Law enforcement's, of course, available during the pandemic, and many of the treatment providers in Boulder County have been available as well. But the isolation and control that we see in domestic violence households where domestic violence can thrive are the same kind of factors that we see with COVID-19 and elder abuse. And add on that the stress, financial, mental, and emotional, that the pandemic puts on all of us. It causes stress for all of us. So those factors, isolation, control, and stress, are the perfect storm, the recipe by which abuse, financial abuse, and physical abuse flourish. So we'll talk more about that and what we could do about it as we go forward in the presentation. So some of the impacts of COVID-19, along with recent events, have certainly been felt in the justice system, including here in Boulder County. So right from the beginning of COVID-19, and by beginning I say middle of March when it was hitting Colorado, we identified certain priorities for the district attorney's office. And as district attorney, I announced these priorities to the staff and also to the community and to law enforcement to make sure we're all on the same track. Protecting community safety is our top priority. Protecting and supporting victims. Also, in response to the coronavirus, reducing the need for individuals to attend court hearings and trials in person. And I'll talk about that further. And then reducing the jail population while preserving public safety. As you may know, jails are different from state prison. State prison is where individuals who are serving at least a year or more of incarceration are sentenced to. Individuals in jails are often there just for a short amount of time. Literally, people are entering and exiting the jail every single day. In addition, jail staff, so members of the sheriff's office, medical staff, defense attorneys, and community members who are visiting inmates of the jail are going in and out of the jail every day. If the coronavirus were to hit the jail, it would spread like wildfire, especially in the close quarters of the jail, and have a direct negative impact on Boulder County as a whole because of the people exiting the jail and then spreading the virus from there. So we went through a number of different categories to determine if individuals who were in the jail in the middle of March could be released to the community without jeopardizing public safety. And we were able to do that, thankfully, successfully in an effort to try to reduce the coronavirus at the jail itself, but also here in the community without having individuals committing significant criminal offenses after their release. We also reduced the need for individuals to attend court hearings and trials. And that was this effort for us, but also continuing to reach out to the community. And here, I'm not going to go through the flyer you see on your screen, but it's an example of the outreach we did early on in the pandemic to reach individuals who are stuck at home with their abuser. So helping people recognize the risk and risk factors that individuals can turn to treatment providers and law enforcement and the district attorney's office for help. And you see there on the bottom left of the screen, on the flyer that we sent out to the community and to the media, the section, we can all learn to recognize warning signs of abuse or neglect, signs of physical injury, unexplained behavioral changes, fear or reluctance to talk in front of others, inadequate care or supervision. Abusers using the fear of the pandemic to manipulate others. And then, of course, the increased stress due to COVID-19. This kind of flyer, this effort is something that we worked on with law enforcement, but also treatment providers. So you'll see this next one, also targeted towards victims of domestic violence and child abuse. Experiencing domestic violence, help is available during the pandemic. And you see two of the wonderful treatment providers we have here in Boulder County. And these flyers went out to local businesses and to the media as well. We sent out an alert on stimulus check scams. Stimulus checks, of course, being offered by the federal government, incredibly helpful and valuable to individuals who are suffering financially throughout the pandemic. We wanted individuals to make sure that they knew that they could be receiving stimulus checks, but to not fall for some of the scams we were starting to see. Those included advisory tips such as not paying any fee to receive stimulus money, making sure that people knew no government agency is going to send you a message asking you to fill out information to receive stimulus money. And no government agency was going to call you to go online or to receive your stimulus money, nor ask you to send any portion of it back. And if you're looking for a flyer on this with practical tips around the stimulus check scams, you can go on the district attorney's website to see our flyer there. You know, one thing I want to mention is auto theft and people breaking into cars. It's been a significant issue during the pandemic. So I want to make sure, particularly for the older folks in our community, you may only have one car, whether that car is a 1972 Monte Carlo, my first car, by the way, or 2019 Porsche. You lose your one car, it's going to have a debilitating impact on your life. We've seen auto thefts and car trespasses. And by car trespass, I mean someone going into a car, going through the glove compartment, going through the center console. Those have gone up dramatically here in Boulder County, but also throughout the entire state of Colorado, with the exception of southern Colorado. So in the Denver metro area, we're up 38%. Western Colorado on the western slope is up 167%. If you look at July of FY19, on the bottom right of your screen there were 1,849 thefts during the first half of 2019. We're now up to 2,316 car thefts. And although 89% of those vehicles are recovered, almost always there's damage to the car and items missing from the car. So often it's because doors are unlocked. So the perpetrators of these offenses are walking down the street, just pulling on car handles, door handles, as they go along. So please join me in locking your car doors and making sure that we don't see these numbers go up any further in Boulder County. So here are some of the general trends we've seen in Boulder County throughout COVID-19. And specifically, we've looked at the data. We've conducted a very careful and thorough data analysis from March through July of 2020. Motor vehicle theft and vehicle trespasses are up. Domestic violence calls are up to both the police and to treatment providers. Sex assault reports have gone down to law enforcement, but interestingly, crisis calls to the treatment providers, the victim agencies, have gone up each month. Burglaries have gone up significantly in the city of Boulder and down in some jurisdictions in Boulder County and remain steady in others. Let me talk for a moment about the burglaries going up in the city of Boulder. Interestingly, that includes people going into open garages. So if an individual has a garage attached to their house, that counts as the home for purposes of data collection around burglary. And roughly a third of the burglaries we're seeing in the city of Boulder are people going into residential garages. So making sure the garage doors are closed is a real key part to take from this presentation, to make sure the garage door is closed during the day because people are going in and taking bicycles and so on. A couple of interesting crime categories are down from March through July of 2020 as a result of the pandemic. Child abuse is down, driving under the influence is down, and drug offenses are down through most of Boulder County. Why is that? It's a good question. Child abuse is down statewide. That's not because child abuse is happening at a lesser rate, but kids are being cut off from common forms of assistance. So kids aren't going to school, teachers and counselors aren't seeing them, noticing changes to their physical well-being or emotional well-being. And those teachers and counselors who are mandatory reporters are less likely to see the signs of child abuse. So for example, in the week before the pandemic hit Colorado, when school was still in session, the state of Colorado received roughly 4,800 calls to their child abuse hotline, 4,800. The following week, after schools were closed, that number dropped to 2,400. So it dropped by half. That's not because there was a 50% reduction in child abuse. That's because there was a 50% reduction in people being able to help kids who were being abused. I want to stress that here because it's the same formula, the same recipe, the same perfect storm that we see around domestic violence and elder abuse. Driving under the influence is down, and if I had to speculate, I would share with you, I think it's probably due to the fact that bars are closed or closing earlier, and if people are drinking to the point where they're intoxicated, they're at home more often than they're on the roads. And then drug offenses are down as well. And I think that's because people are out and about less and having less interaction with others on the street, including law enforcement when they're on the street. We took, as I mentioned, some really proactive steps to limit the public presence in the courthouse. I really appreciate the strong working relationships we have here in Boulder County between the district attorney's office and law enforcement, but also the DA's office with the public defender's office and with the courts. So our chief judge, Judge Bakke, and the other judges worked very closely with the DA's office, public defender, and the sheriff's office. Sheriff's office is in charge of security at the courthouse, to make sure that we took every step we could, every proactive health and safety measure we could to protect the people in the courthouse, while also continuing to honor the rights of the accused and the rights of victims while maintaining public health and safety. So for any non-essential appearance, those were postponed. And for essential appearances where they could be conducted via video, we moved to a video platform called WebEx. That's been especially successful. I will share with you, if you're home a lot now and you're finding it difficult to fill your day, you can go on the state judicial website and click on the links to watch any court proceeding in the state of Colorado. And we have a number of trials per week now, since trials started up again in the beginning of August. And you'll be able to watch trials from the comfort of your own home. Attorneys can appear from the comfort of their own home if it's not for a hearing or a trial. And for the accused, the witnesses, attorneys, and prospective jurors, this has been a really important step for us to take in terms of protecting the individuals who come into the courthouse, and as a result, protecting the spread of the coronavirus through the community. Our goal here at the District Attorney's Office, our top priority is to have a safe community. Boulder County is a wonderful place. It's really incredible, and I'm really lucky to be raising my kids here. As you heard in the introduction, I have 12-year-old twins, and we moved here from Brooklyn, New York. And at the time, I thought I had a great life in Brooklyn. My family's there. My wife and I were at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. It was a great job, and that's where we met. Actually, my wife, Antonia, was the head of the Identity Theft and Cybercrime Unit. If you know her, you know that she's the smarter of the two. And I was so lucky to be living there. But the quality of life here is 1,000 times better. We moved here and we never looked back. And I imagine that's true for many of you. So I really want to stress, Boulder County is a really safe and wonderful community. Our top priority as an office is to make sure that remains the case. So we engage in a lot of crime prevention. And if you attend Liz's presentation on Thursday, you'll see that we go out in the community all the time. Ideally, we'd be in person. I wish I was in person right now, but if it's virtual, so be it. We're going to get out in the community all the time and make sure that the community is armed with the knowledge and the practical tools they need to make sure they're not victimized, including in the important area of elder abuse. So you should attend Liz's presentation on Thursday. Those presentations, by the way, are free. So if you live in a neighborhood or a community home or a facility, we're happy to come or put it on virtually to do a crime prevention tip to make sure people there are being protected. Okay. We also work hard to make sure that in our serious cases where people have been victimized, where something truly horrific and terrible has happened, that we're able to secure the right result and do justice for the victim and for the community. I feel so extremely grateful to work with such outstanding women and men in the District Attorney's Office. And I'm grateful to my predecessor, Stan Garnett, because he did a great job building up this office. This office, the staff here, they work extremely hard, tirelessly, including through the pandemic, to make sure we're getting the right result in our serious cases. One thing we're very passionate about here that I feel very strongly about is lowering the rate of reoffense. This is an area for improvement in the state of Colorado. What I mean by that is Colorado lags behind other states in our ability to provide for successful rehabilitation of offenders. And as long as we continue to have people cycling in and out of the jail over and over and over again, or going back to state prison again and again and again, we're failing public safety, we're failing the taxpayers, we're failing the victims, and quite frankly, we're failing the offenders. So we put a lot of programs in place to try to lower the rate of reoffense, including a mental health diversion program. It's the only one in the state of Colorado that has a mental health treatment available for offenders on low-level offenses. These are low-level offenses where someone's suffering from a mental health crisis. They're diverted to treatment in the Boulder community. That treatment is paid for by the state and by federal grants. Our community protection division that I've touched on. Restorative justice and diversion. We've expanded restorative justice and diversion by 350%. We still maintain a 92% success rate. That's why I'm so passionate about restorative justice and diversion. Because if we can help people get back on the right track and break that cycle of them coming back to the jail over and over and over again, we'll enhance and improve the safety of the community. We also have a Fresh Start program, our immigrant protection program. We work closely with reentry groups to make sure that we're doing everything we can to lower that rate of reoffense. That's where Colorado needs to do a far better job. And I am absolutely committed to making sure we do everything we can in Boulder to help people get back on the right track and to not reoffend over and over and over again. I see I have a couple questions in the chat, so I'm going to get through the next couple slides and then I'll turn to the questions. I will say recent events, including the murder of George Floyd and the social unrest since and others, has had a profound impact on the criminal justice system, as has COVID-19. And we've all seen protests and deeply felt expressions of anger, anguish, and outrage towards the police and the justice system, and demands for reform. And our country has certainly weathered a difficult time, and we still are. So what do these times of crisis reflect about our justice system, and where do we go from here? So a couple things, and I'm going to turn to the questions. First, Colorado was one of the first states to move on improving policing and also enhancing the trust that people can have in the police. And I was honored to testify on behalf of all the district attorneys in Colorado, alongside Sheriff Joe Pelley, Boulder County Sheriff, who testified on behalf of all the sheriffs of Colorado on Senate Bill 217, which was known as the bill to enhance law enforcement integrity. Part of that is recognizing that we have to own and address problems within the justice system and do everything we can to improve the justice system. I have a couple of summary points about Senate Bill 217 on that next screen there. Bans the use of chokeholds, changes the fleeing felon rule, addresses the duty to intervene for all police officers, use of force changes, also qualified immunity, and then having stops and data recorded by law enforcement and then shared publicly with the state and available to the public, body-worn cameras. When I mention body-worn cameras, it reminds me of an important thing that you might be interested in, that most of the Boulder County law enforcement agencies already had all of these things in place. I think it's really important that we be consistent statewide and that these protections and improvements be applied to law enforcement throughout the state. But I would highlight for you that the outstanding women and men in Boulder County law enforcement, working for the 8 different law enforcement agencies we have in Boulder County, most of them were already complying with these policies at a department level. And now these policies are in effect statewide as law. So this pandemic and these challenges that we're living through right now are really an opportunity for us to reset and reevaluate how we function as individuals, as a criminal justice system, and as a community. I know it's a really challenging time, but I also think there are lessons to be learned. For example, virtual court appearances. Also looking at the data around domestic violence and developing a more holistic approach in how we do that. Looking at how we do policing in our community. Looking at how our community responds to these challenges. There are some really important things we can take and learn from these steps. Also looking at the justice system and see what we can do to improve. And we do that by scrutinizing the data. So looking at what offenses have gone up or down during the virus and always looking to improve and do the very best we can for the community. You can take a look at our website for further information on some of our programs and protocols. You can follow us on Facebook. I really encourage you to do that. We have a great team that puts stuff on Facebook every day. In fact, if you go on Facebook today, it should be up there already, you'll see the Daily Camera article introducing Buck, the newest employee of the District Attorney's Office, who's a court support dog that we were able to secure from a group called Colorado Canines for Independence, which provided the training and the dog for free, by the way, no cost to the taxpayers. And Buck is going to make a big difference in helping victims, offenders in our diversion program, and also our employees. I think one of the things about Buck that I'm excited about is our employees see things, deal with things that you shouldn't have to see. You shouldn't have to immerse yourself in. They do it because they're so committed to protecting the community. And they do an amazing job fighting for justice in those cases. But vicarious trauma, secondary trauma is something we work on. So that's an important part of what Buck's going to be doing. And what I really emphasize for you is calling us if we could do anything to help you stay safe, to help you stay healthy, and letting us know what we can do to help you. And that's my direct line on the screen there. I'm going to stop sharing here and take some questions. We have some great questions in the chat. Let me just scroll up here. All right. With a lot of social services closed for in-person services, that's correct. Many of the county departments are closed for in-person services. The district attorney's office is open though, and law enforcement's open and available. What is the best way for people to ensure they're contacting the right organizations as opposed to being targeted by scammers over the phone? That's a great question. One thing I would encourage all of you to do, if you believe you're being targeted by a scammer calling you, is to ask them for their contact information. Often, scammers will just hang up at that point. I was called by someone last year, for example, saying that the IRS was looking for my accurate information, and I asked them to give me the IRS phone number, and they hung up. Ask them for their number, and then contact them. You could also contact our Community Protection Division. The number's on the slide that I just showed you, 303-441-3700. We're happy to check to see if it's a scammer or an actual county agency or social service agency that's reaching out to you. Let me look at this next question here. So it's about adult protective services. If you don't have adult protective services following up, you should call them again and then call the law enforcement agency for your jurisdiction or call the district attorney's office if they fail to show up. Fail to respond. Because the question was, are there any extra steps one can do if reports have been made to APS and nothing has been done? Seems like every time a report is done for individuals, they don't. The stakes are too high. That's their responsibility. And the older people in our community are the ones that we should be working incredibly hard to protect. And that's why I know Adult Protective Services hires great people and wants to make sure they respond to every single call they get. Sometimes it's a breakdown in communication. So I would encourage you to follow up with them or follow up with law enforcement. And if you need us to reach out to the district attorney's office, we're happy to facilitate that discussion as well. Okay, we have about 4 minutes left. What questions do you have for me before we wrap things up? Okay. One more question here. So it's a question about having an unethical court-appointed guardian. If you believe you have an unethical court-appointed guardian or attorney, there's a couple things you could do. So first is report it to the court. I really encourage you to make a complaint directly to the judge when that takes place. There's another option as well. It's called Attorney Regulation Council. They work, they're part of state judicial. They work for the state. It's their job to receive reports of any unethical conduct by attorneys. So you can make a report to Attorney Regulation Council, and they will investigate. And in my experience, they've always followed up on complaints about attorneys, and then they respond to the person, letting them know if they've determined that the attorney has violated the code of ethics or not. So that's something that comes to mind in terms of that question. Or updated, another question here, are updated copies of the Colorado Senior Law Handbook available? Yes, they are. Glenn, thank you for that question. We'll make sure that we get updated copies of the Colorado Senior Law Handbook to the Bar Association. We're happy to distribute those to all attendees. It's a good question, Glenn. Thank you.
And if I can jump in here on the handbook, we also have a link available. Kyle, can you put that slide up? It was one of the ones that I sent out ahead of time.
Of course, just 1 second. Let me get that back up.
No problem. But yeah, we will, it is available both online, and we will have a few copies available for people to pick up if they really want the physical copy.
Okay. And then I know we have 1 minute left, so I wanted to finish with what I started with. I know we're going through a challenging time. I'm 100% confident we're going to get through it together. So relying on those around you, including law enforcement, the district attorney's office, the bar association, and your immediate circle, is a really important thing to keep in mind. We're living through, especially as the weather's going to start to turn cold, not just today, but in the months ahead, we're living through a time where people are isolated from one another. And I really worry about individuals being isolated because I see that being a recipe for elder abuse, child abuse, and domestic violence. So that's why these kinds of conversations are so important. We'll get through this together, and I'm 100% confident we will. We have faced greater challenges in our past. Each and every one of you knows that. You're a testament to it. You've gone through difficult times in this country and this community, and we've come out better on the other side. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that this week is the anniversary of 9/11. And when I was in downtown Manhattan on 9/11 at the district attorney's office there, it was hard to believe that we'd ever get through that period in our lives and in this country. And I'll tell you that we survived that, we learned lessons from it, and we came out on the other side. This pandemic is like nothing I've ever seen, and I think that's true for all of us. But I remain 100% confident that this community and this country will come out on the other side of it. It's really a matter of how we get through it. And to me, the answer is together. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for giving me your time. If there's anything that I or the members of the district attorney's office can do for you, please do not hesitate to call upon us. And thank you again to the Boulder County Bar Association for putting this together. And please join us on Thursday for Liz Parker's presentation. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you.